Matt Lauer and Garrison Keillor being fired today are just the latest in a flood of sexual misconduct allegations against powerful men that began with a New York Times article revealing accusations against movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. While many women wonder why it took so long for there to be consequences for assault and harassment, others are focusing on what prompts the behavior in the first place. Is it our culture, or does it have something to do with masculinity itself? Tom Digby is a professor of philosophy at Springfield College, the author of Love and War, How Militarism Shapes Sexuality and Romance. And Tom joins me from Manchester, Connecticut. Welcome to you.
Hi, Carol. Happy to be with you.
Happy to have you with me. Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K. Just some of what is, Tom, becoming a long list of names, all accused of outrageous sexual misconduct in the workplace. What do you make of it?
Well, I would say that the problem really is the masculinity that informs the lives of most men. Those men distinguish themselves in terms of their privilege, their status, their visibility, and that sort of thing. But they're not being masculine in ways that are that different from many other men. And it is really cultural. Men are culturally programmed into a kind of masculinity that's based on the warrior ideal. It has to do with several factors, but one of them is actually the hatred of women. Men are made to be tough.
Hatred of women, you say?
Yes. Men are made to be misogynist by virtue of the ways that boys are taunted, for example. Boys who don't play football aggressively enough are taunted as playing like girls, and so on. They're called wusses, sissies, and pussies, and that sort of thing. Yes, and so as long as we are conveying to boys that the status of woman is an inferior status and is to be feared and to be avoided at all costs, then they're going to grow up to have a disregard for women, a strong disregard for women. And we're also socializing them to be adversarial. Part of the warrior ideal is to be adversarial, to want to fight and to be ready to fight, and so on. And so they naturally tend to treat women who are they're told are this separate and distinct category, that they're enemies. We use the term battle of the sexes, for example.
Okay.
And then a third factor. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead with the third factor, and then I'll come back to my point.
Well, the third factor is that to be a successful warrior, a person, and it's typically a man in most militaristic societies, has to learn to suppress the capacity, to manage the capacity to care about the suffering of others. And that you see that really powerfully, actually. I was reading today about Matt Lauer, how he had a secret lock on his door that he could control from his desk, so that women could actually be trapped in his office. He knows he's doing things that are hurtful and harmful to them, and it's inhuman, really. I mean, human beings are naturally empathetic creatures, but the warrior has to be able to maim, mutilate, and kill, and cause enormous suffering without. And in order to do that, it's necessary to be able to manage that capacity to care, manage empathy. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of masculinity, that emotional toughness.
Okay, about the lock on the door, he might argue, is just from a defense point of view. He might say, look, sometimes I just want to work, or yes, I have affairs and I just want to be able to lock the door. But certainly I never would imply that I was trapping somebody in there.
Right. Well, I have a lock on my office door, too. And I just get up and go over to the door and lock it if I need to lock it for any reason. I've never needed to trap anyone in my office. That's the difference, I think.
Yeah. The other thing is, where does sex play a role in this warrior, this adversarial? Because presumably, if you're going to attack someone, if you have a hatred of women or whatever, you're just going to try to, I don't know, I can see where people would just exclude them from things. Men have done that, exclude them from important meetings, not give them the promotions they deserve. But where does the part of sex come into it?
Well, I mean, obviously, we all have sexual desire. That part is biological, but how that gets focused and how it gets how it plays out in our lives depends on a lot of culturally programmed factors. So, for example, we have an extremely heterosexist society. We're extremely traditionally. I mean, things are changing, obviously, but in most militaristic societies, there's an emphasis on heterosexism and an aversion to homosexuality. And men are supposed to want to have sex with women. So the biological factor is sort of amplified by the cultural factors that make them want to have sex with women. And since they're also culturally programmed as part of masculinity to want to dominate others, that's part of the warrior roles, to dominate and make other people submit, then they tend to do that to women and their lives. The thing is, there are societies that don't have rape and assault and sexual harassment and so on. There are societies where there's no battle between men and women. There are societies where men and women are just treated as human beings.
Where is this mythical place of which you speak?
Not so mythical, really. There are a number of societies. I talk about some of them in my book, the Love and War book. But one interesting society is the Mosuo people of Yunnan province, China. Interestingly, they do have gender roles, but they're sort of reversed. Not exactly, but the women make most of the important decisions. Men play a more subordinate role. Women initiate sexual interaction, not men. They're very, very interesting people, actually. And the thing is, they have only women own property. Men work on their mother's farms. They'll go and spend the night with a woman who has chosen them, but then they go back the next morning to work on their mother's farm. The thing is, the Mosuo people have no rape, they have no murder, they have no crime, they have no war.
But isn't that just a reverse of what we have had in Western society? I mean, how do those men are chosen, as you put it, and they serve women, and women make all the decisions? Isn't that a pendulum just gone the other way?
Well, the difference is that the Mosuo people are not a militaristic people, and so the women are not warriors. The women are not socialized or culturally programmed into something like our version of like our masculinity. There's no tendency to suppress empathy, to exploit other people, and that sort of thing. There's no tendency to be adversarial and to be forceful and aggressive with other people. There's just no need for that. So it's sort of a reversal in some respects, but not completely, right? It's just partly that way. And there are other groups like the Semay people of Malaysia who basically have no gender roles at all. And interestingly, they're also a non-militaristic people. That's in my book. I talk about that's the factor that makes us gendered the way that we are. Really, is militarism, the degrees of militarism or lack thereof. Mm-hmm. So the Semay people, they never fight. They always choose, if they confront danger, they always flee rather than fight. And they have no gender roles. Their socialization of children is primarily focused on raising children who don't get angry, which is, of course, anger being the militaristic emotion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Interesting. Well, we'll have to leave it there. But there's a lot of interesting concepts and ideals around the world that many of us have no idea about. We'll have to read your book. Tom Digby, author of Love and War, How Militarism Shapes Sexuality and Romance. Tom, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay. Still ahead, Christmas is usually the busiest time of year for airlines, but what do you do when you accidentally grant a lot of pilots the week off? Sarah Galashan will have that story coming up later in the program.